What do you think the Trump trial is actually about? Is it because there is a genuine outrage that needs to be addressed? Donald Trump did what? He reappropriated funds in order to, Stormzy Daniels, justice, I tell you, must be deployed. Is it that there is a judicial principle being pursued here, or is this an attempt to shut down a political opponent and to distract the population of perhaps an entire planet, but certainly the United States, from the fact that you already live in an authoritarian regime hell-bent on global war? So is it a distraction, or is it justice? Donald Trump today was in court for the third day of his hush money trial. And finally now, I can tell you that they have found 7 people that can claim to be impartial and unbiased on the subject of Donald Trump. But listening to this, the threshold is, I think, too low, because some of these people are saying stuff like, I hate Donald Trump. That guy's a son of a bitch. Listen to some of the things that impartial people are saying. It's really extraordinary.
7 New Yorkers have now been chosen to decide if former President Donald Trump is guilty of criminal charges in his hush money payment trial. They're the first of 12 jurors and 6 alternates seated after being questioned by both the prosecution and defense. So far, there are 3 women and 4 men. The foreman is originally from Ireland, and there's an oncology nurse who said no one is above the law. And when asked her opinion of Trump, responded, I don't really have one.
Donald Trump. Oh, yeah, no, I get the guy whose name's on top of his building. You know, I never really think about him. Well, have you got a television? Have you got a newspaper? Are you in the world?
A teacher who has 2 family members in law enforcement said President Trump speaks his mind, and I'd rather that than someone who's in office who you don't know what they're thinking. There are 2 attorneys from big law firms and a grandfather originally from Puerto Rico.
It's really weird, this, isn't it? It's like some sort of weird Avengers. There's 2 attorneys, an oncologist, and a grandfather. Go and get the grandfather. We're bringing out the big guns. Because the others, like, they've got jobs and identities. What are you? I'm a grandfather. I'm nothing without that little kid. Here, have a lollipop. Do you know what I hate? Nothing. You know what I like? Nothing. I'm impartial. I don't even have an opinion on this John Bolton-style Grandpa Tash.
Who called Trump fascinating and mysterious.
Fascinating and mysterious? That's a strong view, isn't it? I find him fascinating and mysterious. I'd die for that man. Fascinating and mysterious. That's like... I don't feel that really about anybody.
Saying he walks into a room and he sets people off one way or another.
I've never seen you looking so gorgeous as you did tonight. I've never seen you shine so bright. I never see so many men ask you if you wanted to dance. Looking for a little romance, and here I have my chance. Anyway, they're all impartial, these guys.
A young software engineer pledged, I will be fair and impartial.
Well, artists ain't fair and impartial. They've drawn him sort of like somewhere between the Joker and Two-Face, haven't they? They've made him look like, there he is, that snarling little bastard.
But many other potential jurors have been excused after saying they'd be unable to do that. The judge also dismissing one man who posted online when Trump was president, saying get him out and lock him up.
I'm impartial on the subject of Donald Trump. What should we do with him? Get him out and lock him up! Well, hold on a minute. That's a strong view of it.
At a campaign stop after court Tuesday, Trump was asked whether he thinks the jurors who were chosen so far will be fair.
I'll let you know after the trial.
Amazing. Here's David Cameron.
I had a very good meeting with former President Trump, and actually...
It's like really impressed with their meetings that they have, aren't they? It was good, actually. I remember the days. I had a pocket square in, I looked brilliant. I sat in a wicker chair, and he looked at me, and I could tell he respected me. Then I noticed in the garden, sad to say, a hog wandered by, and I smelled bacon. And there was a stirring, and there was a rising, and I was out there in the yard.
I noted that over the weekend, or just before the weekend, Speaker Johnson met with President Trump. And obviously, it's American politics, and one shouldn't get too involved, but...
Get too involved? We don't really get involved in other people's politics or anything. You know, we don't send money, for example, to censor dissenting speech about the Ukraine-Russia conflict, and we certainly don't supply weapons to one side of a conflict perfect. We try and keep our mouths shut and our trousers down and our pigs entertained, if you know what I mean.
It sounded to me as if they are now thinking about how to turn that money from America to Ukraine that's so vital, perhaps to turn it into a loan rather than a grant. And that to me looked like good progress.
When you consider the state the world is in, do you feel especially reassured? We've been looking at it, we've bought over the limeys, we've got our British friends over, and a lot of those grants we've turned into loans. Well, might I suggest that what you do instead is take some ayahuasca and go on a deep, deep voyage within your clearly very damaged psyche. And within there, you will discover the essence of the divine. And within that, you will discover that we are one glorious family of humanity. If we're not able to overcome our separateness, we're going to destroy each other. That I like as well. But instead, I think loans, not grants. What do you think, David? David! Oh no! It's happening again! It's happening again! Our great friend and ally, the brilliant Jimmy Dore, sums this up pretty beautifully. Everything they said would happen under Trump is happening under Biden. From prosecuting political opponents to criminalizing protesters, authoritarianism via lockdowns and mandated experimental medical treatments, a genocide of brown people in plain sight, and now war with Iran and World War III. Anything they accuse Trump of doing is a confession of their own. We are ruled by 100% corrupted enemies of the people, and only a revolution can change how this ends. That's from my fellow Putin apologist and Russian propagandist, Jimmy Dore. Is this trial, the trial of Donald Trump, about misappropriation of political funds? Is it even about morality? Or is it about diverting your attention and shutting down political opponents? Let's have a look. Trump's sexual encounter with Stormy Daniels is of interest only to his wife and family. The money paid to Daniels during the 2016 election campaign to keep her from selling her story to the media is likewise of little interest. The manner in which the funds were routed from Trump through his personal fixer, Michael Cohen, to Daniels constitutes at most a technical violation of federal election law, which would ordinarily be settled with the payment of a fine. As for state law, the filing of false business reports portraying the money disbursed to Cohen as payments for legal services was only a misdemeanor, and the statute of limitations has long expired. DA Bragg, however, leveraged the misdemeanor into a felony by alleging that the false reports were an element of a conspiracy to violate federal law, even though no federal prosecutor has chosen to bring such a case. He charged each of 34 false reports separately as a 4-year felony, with a combined maximum 20 years in prison upon conviction. Both the substance and the timing of the case are clearly calculated to benefit the Democratic Party in the 2024 election, a little like the Russiagate scandal, which proved to be false, a little like the suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop story, which proved to be true and was said to be false. At least in part by confining Trump to the Manhattan courtroom away from his own presidential campaign every day of the trial, which is expected to take many weeks. The political calculation could well be utterly mistaken. The Democrats' differences with Trump have largely revolved around foreign policy, particularly over the use of Ukraine as a political and military spearhead against Russia. This goes back to the 2014 maiden coup under the Obama-Biden administration, which ousted an elected pro-Russian president and installed a virulently anti-Russian right-wing regime in Kiev, backed by fascist and neo-Nazi groups. The Mueller investigation, based on false allegations of widespread Russian interference in the 2016 elections, and the first impeachment of Trump, based on his temporary withholding of US military aid to Ukraine, were both examples of this clash over foreign policy. Today, the central issue in official Washington is how to push through another $60 billion in emergency military aid to Ukraine, despite the opposition among a section of House Republicans. Nothing of this political reality is acknowledged in the coverage of the Trump trial in the corporate media. Instead, there are solemn, hushed voice commentaries about historic character of the first ever criminal trial of a former president. You're right. That is how it's conveyed, isn't it? The obvious question, never voiced, of course, on the network news, is why Trump should be the first. Every ex-president in living memory should have been criminally prosecuted on charges like sanctioning mass murder, waging illegal wars, supporting military coups, authorizing torture, and spying on the entire world, including American citizens. But these actions, committed in defense of the worldwide interests of the US ruling elite, are not considered crimes by the US justice system. The criminalization of private sexual conduct is fundamentally reactionary. as are sex scandals in general. They degrade popular consciousness and drown political understanding in a geyser of sensationalism and prurience. The use of such allegations always involves an effort to conceal from the masses the real political differences being fought out within the ruling elite. Oh man, that's pretty good, isn't it? As for the question of hush money, it is well known that Democratic President Bill Clinton offered to pay $700,000 to Paula Jones to settle her lawsuit over her allegations of improper behaviour. In that case, right-wing Republican lawyers induced Jones to refuse the money in order to engineer the perjury trap that led to Clinton's impeachment. In the current case, a Democratic district attorney is using equally underhanded methods. There is nothing progressive or democratic in such political cynicism. The fact that the attacks on Trump are always undergirded and portrayed with such piety, haughtiness and condescension that we are always expected to believe that it's the neoliberal establishment that holds the higher ground, even as they use language mired in class hatred, the basket of deplorables, these idiots. Plainly, what is the play here is to instantiate further centralized authoritarianism, to eliminate the possibility of a Trump presidency, not through the ballot box, but through the judiciary. Anyone who believes that this trial is about, hey, you're not supposed to use campaign funds like that. Meanwhile, they are censoring anti-war voices, they're extraditing Julian Assange, they're funding and escalating wars all around the world, they're not using American military might, moral might, or the power of you, the real power resource to bring about world peace or true progress, or even to live in accordance with your own constitution and your own sanctity and your own sacred values. They're doing it to further enrich themselves and to further subjugate you. And I believe Jimmy Dore's right. At this point, nothing less than revolution will provide a solution. You'll have to let me know what you think. Because while they're claiming that what they're doing is, we're analysing Donald Trump, we're the media, I'm Morning Joe, it's morning. Listen, if you're going to call that show Morning Joe, at some point, you're going to have to fucking wake up. Here they are on MSNBC looking at Donald Trump's face and pretending it's the news and that they're better than you, as always.
While you are sitting there in the jury pool, listening to the judge describe this case to you, Donald Trump is sitting at the defense table looking like this. Let's take that back down to a half screen of Donald Trump. Now, we normally don't allow Donald Trump.
You know, like that episode of The Simpsons where Homer gets accused of sexual impropriety. Mr. Simpson, your silence is only condemning you further.
What do you have to say in your defense? Mr. Simpson, your silence will only incriminate you further.
Mr. Trump, tell me, did you give Stormzy Daniels money out of campaign funds? Uh-huh. Yep, that's right. I've got Donald Trump on the line now. Mr. Trump, is it true that you have not properly tanned your ears? Later in this report, they talk about the application of his fake tan. Meanwhile, that bishop that was knifed live on the internet, he was attacked. We all saw it. You saw it earlier this week in Sydney. Were you familiar with this story? The reason I mention it now is because look at the response of true Christians to a violent attack. I'm not saying that religion is the determinant, or any particular religion is the determinant in how to respond, because surely much violence has been undertaken in the name of every religion, every nation, every ideology. But in this instance, when faced with a knife attack, you have to consider the response.
Good evening. I'm outside the Christ the Good Shepherd Church in Wakeley, which is the scene of a second mass stabbing event in Sydney. This church and its grounds are now a crime scene after a man approached a clergyman mid-sermon and stabbed him multiple times whilst it was being live streamed. We can't show you much of the very confronting video, but I can tell you many members of the congregation leapt to the defence of the bishop and in doing so sustained multiple wounds. Police have arrested the attacker whilst 8 ambulances are currently treating the wounded. It is an incredibly chaotic scene here, with many members of the community outraged and crowding the streets.
Bishop Mari is a brilliant YouTuber, actually, and a wonderful communicator. You may have seen him on PBD or a variety of things, and I hope he comes on this show as soon as he's well enough to. Look at the church's response to these attacks. In the full statement, Christ the Good Shepherd Church pleads with all Christian faithful followers of Bishop Marmari Emmanuel to keep peace with one another and your neighbour as the Lord Jesus Christ has commanded. The Church denounces retaliation of any kind. The Church categorises this attack as isolated and awaits police findings into the motive of the attacker. Our Church also condones the behaviour of the non-compliant and asks the public to respect civil order while keeping the peace which has been sanctioned by Almighty God. A separate statement also states, it is the bishop's and father's wish to pray for the perpetrator. Isn't that the solution to what we're facing across the world right now? An attitude of forgiveness, of faith, a belief in something higher. That we're not just here temporarily and materially to grab things from one another, whether it's favours or money or cash or entire countries or resources. That we're here in the service of one another, to awaken together, to become beautiful together. And we have discarded Christianity and religion as a hopeless superstition while being told that rationalism and neoliberalism and the pursuit of economic power and military power is the real solution. Meanwhile, ordinary Christian Americans and Americans of all faiths, I'm sure, are being sneered at by an establishment that would never deem to entertain a position and stance so sublime, lofty, and more important than that perhaps, likely to bring about a peaceful solution. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more uncensored content where free speech can flourish, join our live stream. Click the link right here to watch the next video if you want to, or become a member of a growing movement. Download the Rumble app and you'll be informed every time we make a new piece of content. Stay free.